black metal typically is more escapist, more romantic, more about sort of mystical connections to nature and so on. And Terzij de Horde is almost the opposite of that. It's about being entangled in the chaos of life and in the chaos of society and politics and everything like that, and finding the the sort of the violence in that, and the entanglement in that.
Go! Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Joost Vervoort. I'm the singer of the band Terzij de Horde, Dutch black metal band from Utrecht.
So let's start with Terzij de Horde. What does that mean? How does that translate to in English?
Yeah, so Terzij de Horde it's a line of poetry from a Dutch poet called Hendrik Marsman, and it's from a poem that is very cosmic and sort of existential in nature, but the line stands for set apart from the masses or apart from the masses. And yeah, it actually occurred to us to take this name because a good friend of the band has a tattooed across his chest, and it's a very unusual phrase. So it sort of stood out as we were reading Hendrik Marsman, thinking of band names. And yeah, it's a peculiar phrase. It sort of stands alone in the poem, away from everything else, even in the poem. And yeah, but it fits the music very well, we think.
And Joost, how would you describe the music of Terzij de Horde?
Yeah, so I would say that it's musically, so it's black metal, but with a lot of hardcore energy. I think musically it's pretty straightforwardly black metal on the whole, but for instance, my vocals as a singer are pretty hardcore infused, and the whole energy of the music, despite sort of like using black metal structures, is quite hardcore in that sense, I would say. So it's that sort of mix, a sort of hardcore attack with the black metal structure and types of riffs and instrumentation.
Would you say that you guys grew up more in like a hardcore punk subculture, or maybe had more of a hardcore punk background? Yeah,
so basically a bunch of us in the band, and definitely the way the band got started was very much from the sort of punk scene. We started as a sort of crust grind screamo band once upon a time, and then that sort of developed over time as band members changed and so on into what we are now. But that energy, I think, has always been there. So even though the music has moved more and more into black metal, and it just seems that just fits us very well. It's just the style we want to play. The energy has always been sort of that those hardcore punk roots. And I do have to say, like, for a bunch of us, black metal is also our original genre that we've listened to and loved for a long time. It's just that some of us got started making music in punk, in hardcore, specifically metalcore, stuff like that.
Did you guys have any goals leading up to those early recordings?
Did we have any goals? So I think the original inspiration for the band was really just, I guess it was just really sort of energetic, and emotional, and just wanted to make intense, violent, chaotic music. The idea for the band started when me and a friend, there was a sort of like, we were sort of fascinated by extreme noise terror and wanted to start a band like that, and then Johan, who is still in the band, our bass player, and who I write lyrics with, joined us, and that's how things got started. So we got started with this sort of cross grind desire in mind, and I think because of Johan joining the sort of scream, because he's a big screamo guy, the sort of screamo influence came in very quickly, and things developed from there. Yeah, but yeah, the original impulse, I think, looking at how, for instance, how intensely political we are today, I think we always were very political, but when you start a band, it's a bit of a different. You just want to create some chaos.
Sure.
I think, and that was, and I'm talking about the very beginning. I think pretty soon after sort of like developing our style and turning into what Terzij de Horde is today, we started doing the sort of like format of the band formed, which I think is lyrics that are sort of mythical and metaphorical and resonant, but that deal with real societal issues in a way that black metal often doesn't do. Black metal typically is more escapist, more romantic, more about sort of mystical connections to nature and so on. And Terzij de Horde is almost the opposite of that. It's about being entangled in the chaos of life and in the chaos of society and politics and everything like that, and finding the sort of the violence in that and the entanglement in that. Which is of course really coming from punk, right? That's sort of the punk influence. Yeah.
And I'd like to speak to you more about your lyrics and the way you tie in these metaphorical themes to real world events. But before we get there, I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about how songs come together for your band. Who starts the songs? How do the songs usually start?
Yeah, it depends. So it's typically a pretty organic process. So there are riffs, there are themes that are being developed musically. Jan and I work on the lyrics, and we're developing ideas about what do we feel we need to speak to as a band. And I think in the case of Our Breath Is Not Ours Alone, the new record, I think that we worked out what this album should be about fairly early on, as a thematic focus, also building on the last two records. Yeah, and then it's about sort of like seeing how the character of the riffs and the themes that are musically being developed fit with the lyrics, and if those two influence each other. So it's this sort of organic process. We'll have a lyrical theme, for instance, a hammer to the great matter of birth and death, which is about loss and grief, and grief, and that sort of fitting the music to that sort of like makes sense for that. I think it's a fairly organic process that involves everyone. Damian and Jelle, our guitarists, spend a lot of time messing around with the riffs that they've written, that they've developed, and then we bring them all together with Richard, our drummer, and the rest of the band to sort of work them into something. And yeah, it's a dynamic, organic process.
Do Damian and Jelle use recording software at all, something like Pro Tools or Ableton, to help with their songwriting, to help with the arranging?
Yeah, definitely. There is increasingly a process of writing a lot of material in software and messing around with structures and patterns, and then bringing it to the rehearsal, and there it really gets developed into something that feels alive and it that works with everyone together. But there's definitely a sort of like increasing sort of like library of materials that we work with. Yeah, and which is a very enjoyable process and yields some very unexpected results sometimes, which is nice, because there's definitely a value to writing together in the rehearsal room, and you get a kind of organic feel to it. But there's also something interesting about just sort of like seeing how different pieces of music that maybe are very sort of like contradictory work together into a natural progression.
It sounds like Damian and Jelle come up with the riffs and the melodies, but you guys arrange stuff together in the rehearsal space. Is that fair?
For the most part, that's definitely the case. Johan and I have also contributed riffs in the past, but now I would say it's more that the primary sort of melody and riff writing happens either in the rehearsal room by Damian or Jelle, or at home, and then they bring it to us.
So as you're hearing these songs develop, as you're hearing them come together and reach their final form, how complete are your lyrics? Do you do a lot of like free writing in terms of ideas and then coalesce it once the song structures are complete, or do you wait until the songs are complete before you really start the lyric writing?
No, we typically start the lyric writing pretty early on. We're sort of writing a little bit ahead of the music, I would say, in terms of themes and topics that we want to take on, and that influences the music writing as well. So we're coming with sort of these suggestions of a song that's about this or that, about that requires a sort of musical resonance, and then we see how that all fits together. The fitting to the music is definitely a process that happens later. We're sort of working out where sections go. We are aware of, and you know, Damien also gets involved with this, for instance, and Jelle and Richard as well, and like sort of placing the vocals in moments where they are the most powerful, and then that changes the lyrics a little bit and so on. But I would say that Jon and I definitely start with lyrical ideas and sort of these worlds that we're developing, and then sort of like connecting that to the music.
Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you for this latest album?
Yeah, so I think we've become increasingly frustrated and infuriated with the state of the world. We are a very outspoken leftist band, and our you know, and again, that's the punk influence as well. But as the world has turned more and more to shit in many ways, this has become more urgent in the music and in the lyrics, and especially with Our Breath Is Not Ours Alone, we've also attempted to be a bit more straightforward without losing the mythical depth and the resonance, and seeing if we can have a directness in that sort of punk way. And I would say, so Our Breath Is Not Ours Alone is a line that is a sort of a paraphrase of a German sociologist, Hartmut Rosa, who writes about resonance and this idea that we are relational beings and that we are intimately connected to each other. And so the album 2 albums ago, Self, was inspired by all the permutations of what it means to be an identity and to be a person, and how that can be destroyed and co-opted and transcended and realized and so on. A very sort of individualistic existential album. And the previous album, in one of these, I'm Your Enemy, focuses much more on the sort of the violence of social forces clashing into each other and different alternative realities fighting for control of the future, which is much more abstract in a way and much more sort of large scale. And in this album, we wanted to combine those two perspectives. So we wanted to ask, what does it mean for a person to be a human entangled with the rest of society, entangled with others, entangled with those that are more vulnerable, and where injustices happen and so on. And the album is really about calling for courage. We're asking people to sort of crawl out from the shadows of authority, and especially in black metal, which is a genre where people are, they're acting very cool. It's very much about strength and sort of, and being an individual and so on. But a lot of it is very drone-like and collective, and everyone is looking at everyone to fit in that mold, and then borrowing strength from essentially authority and patriarchy and so on, rather than being brave enough to say, look, there are many people who are in vulnerable positions who are being crushed under the boot of authoritarianism. I'm going to stand up and try to fight for them. That is, I think, real strength. And rather than sort of this sort of fake fantasy strength of pretending you're a wizard in a cave somewhere, which, look, also great. I love that stuff. Give me a Dungeon Synth album, any day and so on. But I think we need a bit more than only this sort of like romantic escapism and dreaming of being a Viking,
Yeah. I'm curious, with your hardcore punk background, because I'm not that familiar with the black metal scene in the Netherlands. Back in the day, I'm 46, I'll be 50 soon, but back in the day, I grew up on stuff like Sinister and Gorefest and all the great death metal bands that came out of the Netherlands. And recently I discovered a bunch of atmospheric black metal bands that are coming, that have been operating in the last 5-10 years. But is the scene very splintered, or is there a lot of overlap between, like, say, the screamo influenced or even post metal influenced black metal bands and these like more traditional kind of like like you're saying, the Viking mythological Satan worshipping death metal band or black metal bands?
I would say that it's a very small country, so I would say that everyone knows everyone, and there's enough overlap. It's definitely true that the sort of post, and punk influenced extreme metal, it's not just black metal, but it's all these different genres. That's a fairly tightly knit sort of scene. We had a festival about 2 months ago around a whole bunch of these underground bands together. There were like, I don't know, 20 something bands playing at this one festival of all these people who knew each other. We're all like in the same sort of like signal groups and stuff like that, talking to each other. And so, decided to sort of organize something. Yeah, and we are definitely in touch with there's not that many of these bands unless they're sort of small bedroom black metal bands, but there are some, and there's definitely like links. Yeah, I would say it's not entirely splintered. We've played in the past with a band called Kjeld. I was listening to them today, and they're very much in that sort of like, there's like a Frisian black metal, Frisian language black metal, sort of Viking black metal style. And yeah, we've played with them a few times in the past, and though they make pretty different music and have a very different aesthetic, there is a connection. And then maybe the best example of this, where you really see a bridging, is Lijkschouwer, which is a black metal band with some sort of like doomy influences, and in a way really stands between the hardcore influenced extreme metal in the Netherlands and more traditional black metal. And we get along super well. Like, we're great friends, and they're an amazing band as well. So yeah, I would say it's not that splintered. There are some, less familiar, like people who are less familiar with each other, but it's not completely divided, I would say.
So, Our Breath Is Not Ours Alone came out on October 10th through Church Road Records, and I believe this is your third full length. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And yeah, it's been very energizing to work on this record after in one of these I'm Your Enemy, because that record really, it sort of did a lot of good for us. People really appreciated it. It gave us a big boost, played big festivals, and yeah, we really were very proud of that record. And it gave us a lot of inspiration to work on this one and get this one out a little bit more quickly in between albums, Yeah.
We spoke a little bit about the process of how this album came together for the songwriting and for the themes. When were you guys finished? When were you guys ready to start recording this?
That's a good question. I'm laughing because we were pretty much ready to go, but there was still a lot of work that needed to be done on the songs while we were actually recording them, and we would probably prefer to be more ready next time, But yeah, I think it was more that we had a deadline. We wanted to release this record this year at a reasonable moment in the year, which we did, and we discussed these things with our labels and so on. So we had a nice deadline to work towards, and we had a lot of music ready. So the music was more or less there. It's just that, we had to work out a lot of the details in the recording process. And well, live and learn, we still finished everything on time. We're very happy with the record, but yeah, it was an intense back and forth also with the producer and with Damian, who has done a lot of production on the album as well, our guitarist. So yeah.
The producer on this was Quentin Verhoef?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's somebody you've worked with before, right?
Yeah, that's right. We recorded Self with him, and we recorded our Rage of Rapture Against the Dying of the Light with him, our debut EP. And yeah, always really enjoyed working with Quintijn. He has a beautiful studio in the woods somewhere outside of Utrecht. That's just like a joy to go to. I've been there many times to record vocals in sort of smaller sessions. And yeah, it was a great process to work with Quintijn. Always happy to work with him.
Was Quentin operating more as an engineer with Damien handling the mixing, or were they both sharing duties?
So for the mix, they were sort of collaborating very intensely. Also, that also had to do with us needing to work out some details still, and re-record things and so on. So it was a very intense back and forth. I think Quintijn had Damien on the phone 5 times a day to discuss some detail, and I think Damien was very happy to be done with the record at some point. Yeah.
Sound-wise, what did you want? What did you want the finished product of this album to sound like? What did you want the listeners to come away from with this album?
Yeah, so we knew that Terzij de Horde's music is very visceral, very intense, very full force, and we were looking for a sound that was a little bit more open, a little bit more spacious, and a little bit more digestible, because we knew the music would be so full on. And it's interesting because in my experience, knowing the song so well, I feel like, oh, it's a fairly sort of open album, but the first people who heard it were still like, holy shit, man, this is it's blowing my head off. And it was interesting because when you're in it yourself, you don't really notice that intensity anymore. But I think we found a good balance between it being very, very intense and still being open enough to be something you can step into. You can have a black metal production that's very closed off, a bit smaller, and it's sort of abrasive, but not in a way that it allows you to sort of breathe in the album. And I feel like we did what we could to make it breathe and open up more. And we're very happy with the result of that. And we're getting that feedback also from people who know our music really well. So it's good to hear.
I mean, you mentioned extreme noise terror in the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the production has more of the punch of like maybe something like the crust punk or old grind, where it's like very in your face and not as like reverby or kind of like atmospheric as?
Yes, yeah. I would say so. And I think that fits our music very well, right? As you can understand from sort of the aesthetic approach. So it's more in your face, you're more punchy, definitely less sort of indirect and atmospheric. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I believe you have a guest on the last song. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So on the last song, which is Discarding All Adornments, we have Amelia Baker from Cinderwell on, and Amelia is, puts in an amazing performance. We think very happy with her. She works together with a friend of Johan's, who is our bass player and who has known this friend, mutual friend of theirs for a long time, has been a fan of Cinderwell for a long time. Others in the band, like Damien and myself, have really been big fans of hers or of her music for a number of years. And yeah, we were just thinking about who can we collaborate with, and this was what we sort of dreamed and hoped could happen. And Amelia was very, very interested, very excited. She likes black metal. She also tours with bands like Paul Bear and stuff like that. So she's really in the scene and sort of the extreme metal scene. She played Roadburn, and yeah, she was very excited to do it. And her idea to do spoken word with the string sections that she has orchestrated for us, composed for us. Yeah, it was just amazing and now to hear that that's my favorite song of the album, not just because of Amelia, but definitely plays a role,
So was Amelia also involved in the arranging and the songwriting?
Well, yeah, I would say so, because we sent her early demos and she composed the string sections that you hear, both their string sections sort of accompanying her voice along with Damien's guitar. And there's also string sections ending the song that are also composed by her. So she's definitely a composer on that song for sure.
What I
Do you want to say anything about the gentleman who mastered the album?
Yeah, Arthur Risk. He's done some big albums. I think the one the first one that comes to mind is Black Curse, which is amazing. By the way, that's an insane live band to see. If you've ever get a chance to see them, but they really blew us away when we saw them live. But yeah, fantastic mastering. It seemed to have been a fairly easy job. We were happy pretty soon with what he did, and yeah, it's an interesting thing working with mastering because the best masters in the world are quite accessible. They're affordable. They can do the work quickly. It's just because it's not such a long process that it's easy to just work with top people like him.
Was this the first time that you worked with Arthur?
Yes.
Was he a recommendation from Quintine or?
No. It's someone that we thought of ourselves just off of his discography, basically.
Okay. So, what do you guys have planned in terms of live shows, tours, maybe even festival appearances, either for the end of this year or next year?
Yeah, we just played a festival called Soul Crusher in Nijmegen in Netherlands, which is it's sort of like Roadburn. Of course, I think many people know about Roadburn because it's sort of worldwide known festival. And we've played Roadburn a few times, and this year we played Soul Crusher for our initial release show. And that was an amazing show. We had Charlotte Wessels, who is a singer who sort of in the sort of broader gothic metal space, sort of this sort of like very classically trained sort of singer who performed Amelia's parts, which is of course not singing but speaking, but she did that really beautifully. And yeah, it seems like we crushed the show. It was an amazing evening. So we did that. We have a bunch of shows lined up at different festivals in Europe. We are currently discussing organizing some shows abroad that I can't really say anything about yet, but yeah, the next big show that's coming up for us is a show in our hometown in Utrecht in Tivoli, which is the biggest venue. We're headlining a show, which is very unusual for a black metal band, especially sort of a hometown band to be able to do. But we're very excited about that. We're playing with a folk singer, a friend of ours, Broeder Dieleman from Zeeland, who from a province in the Netherlands, who is singing about these sort of legends from that area and has wonderful political perspectives. And we're playing together with Teardrinker, an amazing sort of post-metal, post-hardcore, black metal influenced band that's just a volcano of energy. And it's such a wonderful lineup. We're probably getting speakers there, and that's what we're organizing today at the moment, actually. It's going to be exciting. So yeah, so we got some things planned. We had a booker who stopped working as a booker, and that sort of created a few hiccups. But we're talking to new booking agents at the moment to organize more shows because it's hard. We all have other jobs. I'm a university, associate professor. Johan is a teacher, and being a high school teacher is probably the one that has the least time for all of this. And so everyone's got jobs like this that sort of limit our capacity sometimes to do things, but we're very eager and very excited to play abroad and stuff. So it's looking good and it's exciting. We did a lot of these things on the back of In One of These I'm Your Enemy as well, and it was like this sort of year of very exceptional performances. And we are very interested in playing unusual festivals outside of the metal sort of space as well. Obviously we play a lot of metal shows, but yeah, interesting possibilities at sort of more general festivals and weird sort of media festivals and so on.
Out of curiosity, are you a professor of philosophy?
No, I'm actually, sort of. My associate professorship is transformative imagination. And it's about, I'm a biologist actually originally, but I've sort of shifted from biology into political science and sort of dipping my toes into sociology and media studies. I do a lot of work on how do people imagine the future to be and how does it impact action in the present at a sort of level of politics. I used to work in policy making a lot, working on sustainability issues all around the world. I used to work at the University of Oxford for 7 years and then came back to the Netherlands. And somehow kept sort of being involved with Terzij de Horde, which is, I'm very happy that we survived all of that. But yeah, it's about a lot of the topics that the band is about really are coming back in my work as well. So it's about how does the popular imagination influence what is possible in politics in the present. I'm developing a video game called All Will Rise, that's about taking billionaires to court for destroying the planet, and it involves a whole bunch of people who are veteran game developers from studios like Guerrilla Games, who made Horizon Forbidden West and Zero Dawn, and people working on the communications team of Doom: The Dark Ages, and sort of this industry collective, and we're all making this video game together. Yeah, so this sort of like space of games and music and other creative practices, how they influence collective imagination and how that connects to societal change, something like that. And that, and the ideas there really feed into the music as well.
Interesting. So, Our Breath Is Not Ours Alone is out now through Church Road Records.
Yes.
Joost, please tell everyone listening to this, how can they order the new album? What's the best way to get it?
Yeah, so we have the album. The album has been released with 3 labels. There's Church Road, who are releasing the vinyl and the CD. Church Road is a UK-based label. They're also the record is also available through them through Death Row Records, both in Europe and in the US and elsewhere. Then we have FIA, which you pronounce as FIA, but you write it as FIADH. And they're on Bandcamp, and they're a New York-based label who are amazing. They support animal rights, and they're doing this fantastic project of this sort of vegan sanctuary in Ireland because of the owner having a link to Ireland. They're wonderful. They have a wonderful social media presence, and they're releasing the tape. And then we have our friends from Tartarus Records in the Netherlands doing the tape in Europe. So FIA does it in the US, and Tartarus does it in Europe, and Tartarus have been longtime friends of ours. You can order these various things either from Church Road or FIA or Tartarus or from our own Bandcamp, Terzij de Horde. So you'll have to look up how to write Terzij de Horde, but we have a lot of fun getting people to try to sort of like say that name if they're not Dutch. But yeah, so merchandise, all kinds of stuff is available on our own Bandcamp as well. But definitely check out the labels as well, because they're fantastic. We're so happy to work. They're all enthusiastic. They're all just working very hard for us to do cool things, and we're so excited about all of that. So yeah, it's a great collaboration.
And I believe you guys have an AmpWall page as well, right? Your releases are on AmpWall?
That's right. We have an AmpWall page, and AmpWall is actually special to us because Chris from Woe is involved in that, and we love Woe, and we love that band, and so we're very excited to be on AmpWall as well.
Does all your merch go through your Bandcamp page?
Yeah, our merch goes through Bandcamp, but again, the labels also sell some merch and some things, but definitely also to Bandcamp. Although we also have exclusive shirts and stuff that we just sell at the shows, but that's a different situation, of course.
Sure. And if people want to follow the band online and get updates on tours and shows and things like that, what's the best way to find Terzij de Horde?
So we're basically everywhere. We're not so active on Twitter anymore because of the state of that platform being completely fucked. But Blue Sky, Instagram is active, Facebook still. Those would be the places to go, I would say. And I would say the most interesting ones would probably be Instagram and Blue Sky. So
I actually interacted with your bass player on Blue Sky, and it seems like maybe we're the only 2 metalheads there. But hopefully there will be more at some point. There are more. We still on Blue Sky. I've been on Blue Sky for a very long time. Starting the Blue Sky, I called it the only black metal on Blue Sky, and that's no longer the case. But it's funny to keep the name like that, just to be a dick, So yeah. And as far as your work, what you talked about in terms of the video games, how can people follow that? How can people get updates on that? Yeah, definitely follow All Will Rise. All Will Rise you can find it on Steam. So you can wishlist it on Steam. We're also starting a Kickstarter because we need to collect a little bit more money to finish the game. We're in a good state, but it will come out mid next year. But yeah, so allwillrise.com, and yeah, go to Kickstarter. We are already a loved project, officially loved project by Kickstarter. So we're very excited about that. And you can read about us in The Guardian. There's an article in The Guardian interviewing our producer and our narrative director, which is very cool. So we're in PC Gamer, IGN, like lots of places already. And there's a trailer and there's lots of stuff. So yeah, be excited about that one. There's definitely going to be a lot of good music in that game as well. Joost, it was very nice chatting with you. Yeah, likewise. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else you want the listeners to know about?
Yeah, I think the world is on fire. Fascism is everywhere, and just resist and make connections, make friends, make communities. Don't be cowed by the forces that are sort of dominating, and also don't try to be cool and be a right-wing asshole, even though you love black metal. It's not just about the riffs, as much as we would like to. Some people would like to believe that it is.
Well put. Thank you, Joost.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrian.